Hello, all. This is Finn, and I just wanted to record a brief little message at the beginning of this to say that thank you for checking out my dumb little short story. And this is the first of hopefully many writing projects that I am hoping to work on. I'm really into creative writing, so if you could let me know what you think, that would be great, and I would love that. Also, I wrote this, so OC, do not steal, etc., etc. But without further ado, Gvatado. A knock sounded at the office door to signify the beginning of lunch. Agent Victor Kraus stood up with a groan. The paunchy man was in his mid-50s and had been working for the National Security Agency, or NSA, for 27 years. His shoulders sagged under the weight of 27 years of a low-level government job. He was tired of life, the universe, and everything. But most of all, he was tired of the rookie they'd saddled him with for this surveillance operation. Kraus had seen many a cop drama in his time, and only when his supervisor had decided to pair him up with Eliza Cunnings did he finally realize what all the grizzled old men in those movies had been whining about. However, while the movie cops, usually played by Bruce Willis, always learned to accept their new partner, he would not. Agent Kraus opened the door to see a young, eager woman dressed in a suit and holding a pizza box. She raised it toward Kraus with a smile. "Did you forget your keycard?" he grumbled. "It was easier for you to open it than for me to go digging in my pockets while carrying a pizza. You should use your card next time." Kraus took the box and opened it. His half was good old artery-clogging sausage, but Cunnings's was the worst of all pizzas. Pineapple. Cunnings stepped into the shared office, kicking the door closed behind her. She plucked one of her vile pizza wedges from the box. "He do anything interesting while I was gone?" Aside from her taste in pizza and her obnoxiously peppy attitude, the worst thing about Cunnings was her Mississippi accent. "Not really," Kraus growled in his flat tone. "He's been in that damn document for 40 minutes. He picked up a sausage piece, flicking off a chunk of pineapple. "Well, he is a writer," Cunnings said, as though Kraus didn't already know that. The person they were referring to, Jerry Towns Jr., was the target of their surveillance. He was an author, some of whose books contained strangely specific predictors of terrorist attacks. He wrote fantasy and science fiction novels, two terms that had immediately killed Kraus's interest in the case. In contrast, Cunnings, a connoisseur of nerd books, had only become more excited about the operation. She'd immediately gone out to purchase a good portion of Towns's work. Cunnings took a seat at her desk, glancing up at a group of large monitors. One was connected to a tiny camera set into a lamp beside the man, providing a side view of his workspace. Another hijacked the webcam, showing Towns's young but tired face. A third showed a live feed of his computer's activity, a black terminal spouting raw data in bright green text. Cunnings said it was useful, but Kraus preferred to look at the real, physical world. The fourth and final camera captured the computer's screen, fed by a backdoor program hidden in a tiny drive that their target still hadn't noticed, clogging his computer's port. With a cluck of her tongue, Cunnings looked away and picked up The Broken Mirror, the newest of Towns's books. Kraus had tried to read it in a moment of weakness the week previous. He'd even tried the man's most famous novel, Darkness Rises, not to be confused with sequels Darkness Gloats and Darkness Falls, but had thrown it down not 15 minutes later. "Are you sure you don't want to read one of these?" Cunnings asked again. Kraus shook his head. Another of Cunnings's infuriating habits, nagging. A movement on one of the screens caught Kraus's eye. Towns had stopped writing, opened a new tab to type. Most common type of short sword. "Gladius," Cunnings muttered, eyes trained on the same screen. Sure enough, Jerry switched back to his document and began writing. Kylan swung his gladius in a long arc, catching the knight across its breastplate. He did that a lot. Most of his search history was looking for minute word differences, father versus further, or finding formal terms for everyday objects. It was not entertaining to watch. It remained not entertaining to watch for the rest of the day, and at 9 p.m. the two agents from the night shift arrived, and Kraus and Cunnings went their separate ways for the night. The next morning, Kraus arrived at 9 a.m. sharp to find Cunnings sitting at the desk, in Kraus's chair. "That's my chair." Cunnings looked up from her book. "Well, howdy to you, too." "Get out of my chair." "Look, they're the same chair. What does it matter?" "What matters is that you should quit sitting on my chair." All right, fine. Cunnings closed the book and stood up, moving to the other chair and muttering, "Maybe you should quit sitting on that stick." Kraus fell heavily into his chair and stared at the screens. Cold silence reigned until lunchtime, when Kraus was forced to speak. It was his turn to get the food. "Hey, pizza again?" "Whatever." "Do you want pineapple?" "Fine." 2 hours and one pineapple sausage pizza later, Kraus burst out, "Jesus Christ, are we really this worked up about a chair?" "I'm not upset about the dying chair," said Cunnings. "Then what?" Kraus exclaimed. "I'm upset at how you reacted to the dying chair. They're the same chair. It didn't warrant that outburst." "But sputtered Kraus. "You can't—" This whole situation was stupid, and Cunnings had started it, but maybe he had been a bit much. "Okay," he said finally. "I'm sorry I got so upset about you sitting in my chair. But please don't do it again." "I appreciate that," Cunnings smiled. "And I'm sorry that I sat in your chair. I'll stop." Maybe Cunnings wasn't so bad after all. The next day, Cunnings walked in to find Kraus squinting at the screen that displayed Jerry's manuscript. Kraus didn't notice her until she cleared her throat. He jumped, and she laughed good-naturedly. "You like the book?" "Of course not." But he did. Towns's The Chronicles of Lumina series was pure historical fiction, none of that fantasy nonsense. Cunnings raised her hands. "It's fine, man. I won't judge." Then she tensed, looking up at the screens. Kraus glanced up as Jerry finished entering "most effective poisons" into a search engine. "It's a false alarm," he said, waving it away. "Vizier Drakian is plotting to kill Emperor Gilderoy, and Towns just wants to know what he should use for maximum realism." Cunnings gave him the side-eye. "Is that so?" "Shut up." But his tone was gentle. They lapsed into silence again. Over the next few hours, Kraus watched Towns's tale unfold. Drakian succeeded in killing the Emperor and seizing the throne, but Kylan and the rest of the freedom fighters of the King's Saviors were there to stop him, culminating in an epic showdown at, and the destruction of, the capital, Venangulo. Of course, the cult of Glynyol was working its influence in the shadows, as usual. They'd attempted to summon the titular Glynyol to the mortal plane with an incantation of nonsense words. "Mal supernero ilin, mal supernero ilin, mal nova mondo morta, homors levigas." It hadn't worked, of course, since magic doesn't exist, and therapeutically, the much-hated Father Alou, who'd killed one of the protagonists in cold blood in the previous book in the series, was ripped to shreds by his own cult for preaching lies. Several days passed, and Kraus ordered and devoured the first 5 books in the series like a human wood chipper, much to Cunnings's amusement. It was actively pretty nice. Long, camaraderie days spent reading over the young author's shoulder, which was why when their boss called and told them their assignment was changing, both Kraus and Cunnings were disappointed. "Well, that sucks," said Kraus. "I hope I don't get a clown as a partner this time." Cunnings shrugged. "Yeah, all good things must come to an end. Makes you wonder why we were watching Towns in the first place. He just seems like some harmless 20-something that likes fantasy novels." That was the conclusion they both came to. The NSA apparently agreed, which was why they'd moved the agents on to new assignments. So it surprised everyone when, upon the publication of The Chronicles of Lumina Kingdomfall, the book Towns had been writing as they watched him, Kraus received a call in the middle of the night. Before he knew it, he was in his car and, still half asleep, driving to the NSA's regional office. He arrived and scrambled inside, stumbling on one of the steps and still pulling his jacket on. Someone pulled the door open for him. Cunnings. "No idea." She shook her head, seeing the question in his eyes. "I just got here." They moved into the next room, the door to which hung wide as the agent's boss and several other men in suits panicked around a war table. Kraus and Cunnings entered to no acknowledgement. They waited at the end of the table, and after several seconds, Kraus cleared his throat. "Sir?" The director glanced toward the duo, realizing they were there. "Ah, yes, Kraus and Cunnings," he said. "Would you care to explain how you missed this during your investigation?" He slapped a manila folder onto the table. Cunnings glanced at Kraus, inviting the senior partner to pick up the dossier. When he made no move to do so, Cunnings flipped it open, skimmed the report, then sucked in a breath. "What?" Kraus asked. Cunnings shook her head, incredulous, then read a passage aloud. The incantations of the cult of Glignon activated 47 sleeper agents located across the United States, resulting in the destruction of the Pentagon and Air Force One. The president and her entire cabinet are missing and presumed dead. Towns is believed to have been working with a foreign influence. Their boss shook his head. I am extremely disappointed that neither of you spotted this. I mean, come on! Do neither of you know Esperanto? Kraus made a sound that was the exact combination of a wheeze and a groan. Then he sat down heavily. His chest tightened, and he found it hard to breathe. I'm not done, the director continued. At one point, Towns explicitly wrote in a direct parallel to these attacks, but you two missed it because you were fighting over a chair. He clicked a remote in his hand, and camera footage of the two arguing filled the large TV behind him. You were filming us? Cunnings exclaimed, incredulous. We're the NSA. We film everybody, most of all ourselves, the director responded. Kraus regained the ability to speak. What do we do now? He asked, weakly. The director shrugged. Nobody really knows. It's pure chaos. I've heard multiple generals have declared war on Russia. The remnants of the CIA are, quote-unquote, clearing out various officials, and on the tube we have some tech billionaire with a bad eye telling everybody to stay calm. What about Towns? Disappeared from his apartment last night. No trace. And what should we do? Cunnings cut in. My best advice would be to bunk down for full-on nuclear war. And Kraus? Yeah? If we survive this, you're both losing your badges.